The moon had no name, it did not need one. For 10,000 years, no ship had come close to it. No alien had looked at it twice. The galactic maps marked it with a single red symbol, a small warning sign that every pilot, every explorer, and every curious scientist had learned to leave alone. The symbol meant one thing: human origin. Do not approach. Most species in the galaxy respected that warning. Not because they feared humans. Humans had been gone for 10,000 years. They respected it the way you respect a locked door in an old house. You do not know what is behind it. You do not need to know. You simply keep walking. But the drone did not know any of that. It was a small automated scout, the size of a chair, built by the Kethran Science Council to map forgotten corners of deep space. It had no feelings, no fear, no common sense. It simply floated through the dark, scanning everything it passed, sending data back home. When it passed the nameless moon, it scanned it and it found something. 7 light-years away, on a quiet research station orbiting a blue gas giant, Commander Vale was eating his dinner when the alert arrived. He almost ignored it. Scout drones sent alerts every hour. Dead rock, empty space, frozen asteroid. Nothing interesting. Nothing worth putting down his food for, but something made him look. The alert was simple. Just 3 lines of data on his screen. Location, restricted moon. Sector 7 null. Human origin. Status. No life signs expected. Anomaly detected. 1 heartbeat, steady, ongoing. Vile put down his food. He read the 3 lines again. Then a 3rd time. He pulled up the old galactic records for the moon. Dusty files that had not been opened in centuries. The records were short. The moon had been built by humans roughly 12,000 years ago. Used for approximately 2,000 years. Then 10,000 years ago, the humans had sealed it, locked every door and left. The last entry in the file was written by a human official. The words were simple: containment successful, facility locked. All human personnel have evacuated the system. Do not send anyone to investigate. Do not open the facility. The prison is now empty. Vale read that last sentence slowly. The prison is now empty. He looked back at the drone's data. 1 heartbeat, steady, ongoing. Something inside that moon had a pulse. Something inside that moon was breathing, slowly, calmly, the same way it had probably been breathing for 10,000 years. The prison was not empty. It had never been empty. Vale stood at his window for a long time, staring at the stars. He was a careful man, a logical man. He had spent 30 years in deep space research, and he had learned one rule above all others. When something does not make sense, you do not guess. You investigate. He told himself that is what this was. Pure science. Pure curiosity. He pulled up the moon's coordinates and zoomed in on the visual feed from the drone. The moon was gray and dead, pocked with old craters, completely silent. No atmosphere. No heat, no light. Just a cold, ancient rock hanging alone in the dark. But somewhere deep inside that rock, something had a heartbeat. He thought about the humans. Every species in the galaxy had their own stories about them. Some said humans were just explorers who grew tired and moved on. Some said they destroyed themselves in a war. Some said they simply evolved beyond the need for physical bodies and became something else entirely. Nobody really knew. The humans had left no goodbye. No explanation. One generation, their ships were everywhere, trading, exploring, building. The next generation, they were gone. Every human world abandoned. Every human station sealed. Every human facility locked and left behind like furniture in an empty house. And this moon, this prison, built to contain what Vale thought slowly exactly. He opened a new file and began writing his report to the Galactic Science Council. His fingers moved carefully over the keys. He chose each word with precision. He wrote that the moon deserved investigation. He wrote that the technology inside could be valuable. He wrote about potential medical discoveries, energy systems, historical records. He did not write about the heartbeat. Not yet. Not until he understood it better. But as he typed, one thought kept pushing at the back of his mind, quiet and cold, like a draft coming under a closed door. The humans were the most intelligent species the galaxy had ever produced. Every record agreed on that. They had solved problems that took other species 1,000 years in a single century. They had built things that still worked perfectly after 10 millennia of no maintenance. They had mapped stars that other species could not even see, and those same brilliant, careful, impossibly clever humans had looked at whatever was inside that moon and decided the only safe option was to lock it up, walk away, and never come back. Vial saved his report and leaned back in his chair. Outside his window, somewhere in the deep dark between the stars, the nameless moon floated in silence, and inside it, slow and steady and patient as time itself, something breathed. The Galactic Science Council approved the mission in less than an hour. That should have been the first warning sign. Big decisions, important decisions, take time. They take debate, disagreement, long meetings where older members argue with younger ones. They take doubt. But the council looked at Vale's report, saw the words human facility and ancient technology, and said yes before the coffee on the table had even gone cold. Nobody asked what the prison was for. Nobody asked why the humans had sealed it. Nobody asked about the heartbeat. Vale noticed all of this. He said nothing. 6 days later, his ship, a mid-sized research vessel called the Honora, dropped out of light speed at the edge of the restricted sector. The crew gathered on the observation deck to see the moon for the first time. It looked exactly as the drone footage had shown. Gray, dead, quiet. A round, ugly rock sitting alone in the black with no star close enough to light it properly. The crew had to switch to long-range illumination just to see its surface clearly. Most of them were not impressed. "It looks like a potato," said Dr. Porras, the team's technology specialist. He was a large Kethran with wide yellow eyes and an expression that permanently looked like he was about to touch something he had been told not to touch. A very old, very boring potato. A few people laughed. Sane did not laugh. She was the youngest member of the team, barely past her training years, brought along because she was the only crew member who had spent serious time studying dead human languages. She stood slightly apart from the others, her datapad in both hands, already pulling up old human text records she had downloaded before the mission. She was not looking at the moon. She was reading. Vial watched her for a moment. "Zane, anything useful?" She looked up quickly like someone caught doing something private. "Still going through the language files, Commander. I will let you know." He nodded and turned back to the moon. They landed 4 hours later on a flat ridge near the moon's equator. The surface was completely silent. No wind, no sound, no movement. Their boots crunched on gray dust that had not been disturbed in 10,000 years. Vale looked at the footprints they were leaving behind and felt, for just a second, like they were doing something wrong, like walking into someone's house without knocking. He pushed the feeling down and kept walking. The prison entrance was exactly where the drone maps had shown it, built directly into the side of a long, low ridge, hidden so well that from a distance it looked like nothing more than a shadow in the rock. But up close it was unmistakable. A door, enormous, easily 30 meters tall and twice as wide, made from a dull black metal that Porras immediately identified as an alloy, no longer produced anywhere in the galaxy. Around the edges of the door, carved directly into the rock in deep, clean lines, were words. Human words. The team stood in front of it quietly for a moment. Even Porras said nothing. The words covered the entire rock face surrounding the door, line after line after line, written in at least 4 different human languages, repeated over and over as if whoever carved them wanted to make absolutely sure the message could not be missed. "Sane," Vial said. She was already standing in front of the text, her datapad raised, eyes moving fast across the lines. Her lips moved slightly as she read. Then she stopped. Her lips stopped moving. She lowered the datapad slowly. "Sane," Vale said again. "What does it say?" She turned to look at him. There was something in her face he had not seen there before. Something quiet and careful. The first line says, she paused, "built to contain what we could not destroy." Silence. Then Porras made a short sound, half laugh, half snort. "Classic humans." He shook his head with a grin. "Everything had to be dramatic with them, didn't it? They probably locked up some old computer and wrote a poem about it." 2 other crew members smiled. Someone made a comment about human ego. The tension broke like a thin sheet of ice and the team began moving toward the door, pulling out equipment, getting to work. Vial did not move. He was still looking at Sane. She was not smiling. She was looking back at him with that same quiet, careful expression. Her data pad was held flat against her chest now, pressed close like she was trying to keep something inside it from getting out. "What's the second line?" Val asked, low, just for her. Sane looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at the ground. "I am still translating it," she said. It was the first lie anyone had. Told on the mission, it would not be the last. Behind them, deep beneath 10,000 years of silence, the heartbeat continued, slow, steady, patient, like something that had learned long ago that the wait was always worth it. The door opened on the first try. That was the strangest part. 10,000 years of silence, 10,000 years of no maintenance, no power supply from outside, no hands touching the controls. And when Porus connected his bypass tool to the old human access panel beside the door, the system woke up immediately. No delay, no error. The panel lit up in soft amber light, read Porus's bypass signal, thought about it for exactly 3 seconds, and the door opened. Smooth, silent, perfect, like it had been waiting for them. Vielle stood very still as the massive black door swung inward. The darkness behind it was total, a darkness so deep and so old it felt almost solid, like you could reach out and touch it. Then one by one lights came on inside. Long strips of pale white running along the ceiling, flickering once before settling into a steady glow, stretching away down a corridor that went further than Vielle could see. The facility was still running. After 10,000 years, it was still running. Porus let out a slow breath. "Okay," he said quietly. "Maybe not a boring potato." They walked for nearly 20 minutes before the corridor opened up. What they stepped into was not a room. It was a world. The main hall of the prison was the size of a city block, ceiling so high it was lost in shadow, floor perfectly flat and clean, walls lined with doors and corridors and staircases that branched off in every direction. Everything was the same dull black metal as the entrance door. Everything was precise. Every angle exactly right. Every surface exactly smooth, no decoration, no color, no warmth. The humans had not built this place to be comfortable. They had built it to work, to hold, to last, and it had. Porus moved through the hall with his scanner raised, turning slowly, reading numbers that kept making his eyes go wide. "The power source is deep underground," he said. "Some kind of core system. I don't fully recognize the design, but it's still running at about 60% capacity." He shook his head slowly. 60%. After 10,000 years, and what was it at full capacity? Vielle asked. Porus checked his scanner. Enough to power a small planet. Nobody spoke for a moment. Vielle thought about that. Enough power to run a small planet. And the humans had buried it under a moon just to keep the lights on in a prison. He tried to imagine what kind of prisoner needed that much power to contain. He stopped trying. The security systems were what truly unsettled him. As the team spread out through the main hall, Vielle walked slowly along the walls, studying them. Every door had 3 separate locks, one mechanical, one electronic, one that Porus could not identify at all. Every corridor had motion sensors, pressure sensors, heat sensors, all still active, all tracking the team's movements in real time. Every 30 meters set into the ceiling were devices that Porus eventually identified as containment emitters, machines designed to project a force, field strong enough to stop a freight ship. Every single one was still functional. But the thing that stopped Vielle completely, the thing that made him stand in one spot for a full minute without moving, was the chairs in a long monitoring room off the main hall. A row of old human workstations faced a wall of screens. And at each workstation, still seated upright, still facing forward, were human skeletons. 6 of them guards, still at their posts. They had died here at their stations, watching their screens, doing their jobs. They had not run. They had not abandoned their posts. They had simply stopped. Old age, maybe, or something else. But they had stayed. Every one of them had stayed until the very end. Vielle looked at the skeletons for a long time. He had read about humans in history files. He had always thought of them as clever, ambitious, a little reckless, perhaps. But standing in that room, looking at those 6 figures still sitting at their posts 10,000 years after they died, he understood something new about them. They had been serious people. Whatever was in this prison, they had taken it very, very seriously. Then Porus called out from across the room. "Commander, you need to see this." Vial crossed to where Porus was standing, in front of the largest screen on the wall. Unlike the others, which showed empty corridors and dark rooms, this one showed a live feed. The camera was deep below them somewhere. The image was slightly grainy, slightly dark, the way cameras get when they have been running without service for 10,000 years. But the image was clear enough. A room, large, circular walls. And in the center of that room, barely visible in the low light, something moving, slowly, steadily, back and forth. Vial leaned closer to the screen. The shape was large, very large, but it was hard to make out details in the dark feed. It moved the way something moves when it has been pacing the same small space for a very long time. Not frantically, not desperately, just patiently. Like it had all the time in the universe. Like it had never once believed the door would stay closed forever. "It knows we are here," Sane said from behind them. Both men turned. She was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, looking not at the screen but at the floor. "How do you know that?" Vial asked. She finally looked up at the screen, at the shape moving slowly in the dark. "Because it stopped pacing," she said quietly, "the moment we turned the lights on." On the screen, the shape was completely still now, facing the camera. Nobody slept that night. The team set up a temporary camp in the main hall. Portable shelters, heat lamps, ration packs. All the small, comfortable things that made deep space feel a little less like deep space. Normally on a mission like this, the crew would eat together, talk, maybe argue about research priorities. There was usually noise. There was usually life. That night there was almost none. They ate in near silence, each person finding a reason to sit slightly apart from the others. Porus kept his eyes on his scanner. Two junior researchers named Oleg and Dara sat close together and spoke in low voices that stopped whenever someone walked nearby. Vial sat alone near the corridor entrance and stared at nothing. Only Sane did not sit down at all. She stood at the far end of the hall, facing the wall, reading her data pad. She had been reading since they entered. She had barely eaten. Vial had watched her turn down food twice without looking up from the screen. Whatever was in those old human language files, she was moving through them with the focused desperation of someone trying to finish a book before something terrible happened Vial wanted to ask her again. About the second line on the door, he decided to wait until morning. That was his second mistake. The first had been coming here at all. Morning, or what passed for morning on a moon with no sun nearby, came quietly. The team packed up camp. Porus had spent most of the night mapping the facility's layout using the old human schematics he had pulled from the monitoring room computers. He spread his findings on the table with the eager energy of someone who had not noticed that everyone else in the room was tense. 3 levels, he said, pointing at the projected map. We are on level 1, administrative monitoring entrance systems. Level 2 is support, power core, maintenance tunnels, storage. He moved his finger down. Level 3 is the containment chamber. That is where the feed was showing movement last night. So we stay on levels 1 and 2, Vial said. Porus looked at him. Commander, the whole reason we are here is level 3. The whole reason we are here, Vial said carefully, is to investigate. Not to open containment chambers. We are not opening anything. We are observing. There is a difference. Vial looked at him for a long moment. Porus looked back with the calm confidence of a man who had never personally encountered a consequence in his life. Behind him, Oleg and Dara were already nodding, already sold on the idea. The pull of curiosity in that room was almost physical. Vial could feel it pressing against his own doubt like a tide against a wall. He looked for Sane. She was standing by the corridor entrance, watching the conversation. When Vial met her eyes, she gave a very small, very slow shake of her head. It was so slight that nobody else saw it. Vial saw it. 2 hours on level 2 only, he said. Then we reassess. Porus smiled like a man who had already. When level 2 was extraordinary, the power core alone was worth the entire mission. A design so elegant and so efficient that Porus stopped talking completely for nearly 10 minutes. Which was, as Oleg quietly pointed out, a personal record. The storage chambers held equipment that no living species had seen outside of history files. Entire sections of Level 2 were a scientist's dream. Organized, preserved, functional, waiting. It should have been enough. It was never going to be enough. They found the Level 3 access point at the far end of a long maintenance corridor. A single door, smaller than Vale expected, with a panel beside it that was different from every other panel in the facility. Where the others had been amber, this one was red. A deep, steady, unblinking red that had probably been glowing for 10,000 years. Beside the panel, at eye height, were 4 human words. Sane translated them without being asked. Final lock. Do not open. Do not enter. Just 2 words after the instruction. Do not. As if the humans who wrote it could not even bring themselves to finish the sentence. As if the thing they were warning against was too large to fit inside a simple phrase. Do not what? Oleg asked. Nobody answered. Porus stepped up to the panel. Porus. Vile's voice came out harder than he intended. 2 minutes, Commander. We do not touch anything. We come straight back up. Porus did not turn around. His bypass tool was already connecting to the panel. We came 7 light years for this. I am not going home with nothing. Vile opened his mouth. The lock clicked open. The stairs to Level 3 were narrow and very cold. The temperature dropped with every step they took downward. Not the cold of a broken heating system, but something else. A deep old cold that felt less like a temperature and more like an absence. Like warmth had never existed this far down and had given up trying. The containment chamber door at the bottom was already open. Not broken. Not forced open, perfectly, cleanly, deliberately open, as if whatever was behind it had simply been waiting for someone to disengage the lock above and had handled the rest itself. They stepped through. The chamber was enormous, circular. Just as the camera feed had shown, the ceiling disappeared into darkness above them. The walls were thick with old containment equipment, most of it dark, some of it still humming faintly. The floor was smooth and cold, and the team's footsteps echoed off every surface with a sharp clarity that made each sound feel too loud, too present. At the center of the chamber, perfectly still, was the creature. Vile had tried to prepare himself for this moment. He had looked at the grainy camera feed a dozen times. He had told himself it was just an animal. Just a large, old, isolated animal that had been locked in a room for 10,000 years. He was not prepared. It was enormous. Easily 4 times the height of the tallest crew member. Its body was broad and dark, covered in a surface that was not quite skin and not quite armor, but something that seemed to shift between the two depending on the light. Its face, or if it could be called a face, was flat and wide with 2 eyes set far apart, each one a deep, lightless black. It was not moving. It was not making a sound. It was simply standing in the exact center of the room, arms at its sides, looking at them. Not with hunger, not with rage, with attention, the complete, focused, total attention of something that had been waiting a very long time for something interesting to happen, and had just decided that they would. Dude Porus raised his scanner. The creature's eyes moved to it, then slowly, so slowly it barely seemed to be happening. It tilted its head to one side. The way a scientist tilts their head when they notice something unexpected in an experiment. The way something intelligent tilts its head when it is not looking at a threat, when it is looking at a subject. One finger on its right hand curled inward. The entire moon shook. Every screen in the facility went white. Every door on every level crashed open simultaneously. Not broken, not forced, simply unlocked, as if the facility itself had just changed its mind about everything. And from somewhere deep in the walls, buried in the ancient bones of the prison, an alarm began to scream. A sound so loud and so raw it felt like it was coming from inside Vile's own chest. The alarm that had been silent for 10,000 years. Sane grabbed Vile's arm. "Run," she said. Not loudly, not frantically, quietly, the way you say a word when you have known it was coming for a long time. "Run. Now. Do not look at it. Do not look back." Vile ran. Behind them, in the center of the chamber, the creature lowered its hand. It did not follow. Not yet. It simply watched them go, memorizing every detail, every movement. every face and with the calm patience of something that had never once needed to hurry. Because it already knew. They would not get far. Running in a prison built by humans was nothing like running anywhere else. Every corridor looked the same. Same black walls, same pale ceiling lights, same identical doors on both sides stretching endlessly forward. The facility had been designed with one purpose: to disorient, to confuse, to make escape feel impossible even before anything was chasing you. Vale realized this about 4 minutes in, when the team came around a corner and found themselves back in a corridor they had already run through. Same scuff marks on the floor from their own boots. Same open door on the left they had sprinted past a minute ago. They had run in a full circle. Porus bent forward with his hands on his knees, breathing hard. "The map!" he gasped, reaching for his data pad. "The map is wrong," Sane said. She was barely breathing hard at all. She had stopped running the moment they reached the upper level, walking fast instead, controlled, her eyes moving carefully ahead rather than panicking behind. The facility restructures its internal routing when the alarm activates. The humans designed it that way. The corridors do not change physically, but the path to the exit changes. Every time. Everyone stared at her. "You knew that," Vale said. It was not a question. Sane met his eyes steadily. "I read it in the language files last night. And you did not tell us. I was hoping we would never need to know." Porus straightened up, his face somewhere between exhausted and furious. "So how do we get out?" "The same way the human guards did," Sane said. "There is an emergency exit system. Manual only. It cannot be locked or rerouted because it is entirely mechanical. No electronics, no power required. The humans built it that way on purpose, in case the facility ever turned against them. Where is it?" "Level 1. North wall. Behind the monitoring room." Vale looked at her for one long second. There was no point in anger right now. Anger was a luxury for people who were not currently inside a 10,000-year-old alien prison with an unlocked containment chamber below them. "Lead the way," he said. They moved fast and quiet through the upper corridors, Sane at the front, the rest tight behind her. The alarm was still screaming, that deep, bone-shaking sound that never changed pitch, never paused, never stopped. Vile had already stopped hearing it as noise. It had become something else. A feeling, a pressure behind the eyes, that made thinking slightly harder than it should have been. He suspected that was also intentional. They were halfway to the monitoring room when Oleg grabbed his arm. "Commander," her voice was very low, "very careful. It is behind us." Vile turned slowly. The corridor behind them was long and straight and fully lit, and at the far end of it, perhaps 40 meters back, the creature stood, still, silent, watching. It had not rushed. It had not come screaming up the stairs driven by rage or hunger. It had simply appeared, standing calmly in the corridor the way you stand in a hallway of your own. Home, comfortable, unhurried, completely in control of the situation and apparently aware of it. Vale stared at it. It stared back. "Do not stop walking," Sane said from the front, her back still turned. "Do not face it directly. Keep moving." "It is just standing there," Porus said. His voice had changed. The confidence from earlier was completely gone now, scraped away and replaced with something thin and uncertain. "Why is it just standing there? Why is it not?" "Because it does not need to chase us," Sane said. "What does that mean?" She did not answer. She turned left into a side corridor and kept walking. Vale pulled his eyes away from the creature and followed. They found Dara 3 corridors later. She was sitting on the floor against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around them, alive, completely unharmed. But when Vale crouched in front of her and said her name, she did not respond immediately. Her eyes were open and focused, but aimed at something that was not in the room. Something far away and interior. "Dara." He put a hand on her shoulder. "Can you hear me?" She blinked slowly, turned to look at him. Her face was the color of old ash. "It stood in front of me," she whispered. "It just stood there, right in front of me, and it looked at me." She paused, swallowed. "It looked at me the way I look at data, the way I look at something I am trying to understand and record and keep forever." Another pause. "I could not move. I could not look away. I could not do anything." Vial helped her to her feet. She could walk. Her legs worked. Whatever had happened to her was not physical. He looked at Sane over Dara's head. Sane's expression told him everything. They moved again. Faster now. The monitoring room was close. Vial could see the open doorway at the end of the current corridor, the dark screens inside, the skeletal human guards still at their posts. He was almost at the doorway when he heard Porus stop behind him. "It is here," Porus said. Vial turned. The creature was standing at the junction of two corridors, perhaps 20 meters away, blocking the path back but not advancing, not threatening, just present, filling the space with a weight and a stillness that made the air feel different around it. And it was looking at Porus, only Porus, with that same total, locked, consuming attention it had given Dara. Like he was the only thing in the corridor, like the rest of them did not exist. Porus did not run. He did not speak. He simply stood there, and Vial watched the confidence drain out of him completely. Not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, like water leaving a cracked container. His scanner slipped from his fingers and hit the floor, and he did not look down at it. He just looked back at the creature. Vial grabbed him by the collar and physically pulled him into the monitoring room. Porus stumbled, blinked, looked around like a man waking from a dream. He touched his own face with one hand, uncertain, as if checking that it was still his. "What did it do?" he said quietly. "What did it do to me?" "Nothing," Sane said, moving directly to the north wall of the monitoring room, running her hands across the surface, searching. "It did not do anything to you." She found what she was looking for, a small recessed handle, purely mechanical, almost invisible. "It just looked at you. That is all it ever does, that is all." Porus's voice cracked slightly on the last word. Sane pulled the handle. A section of the wall swung outward. A hidden door, simple and mechanical, exactly as she had described. Cold air from outside flooded in. Real outside air, open space. Stars. Vial pushed everyone through ahead of him. At the doorway, he stopped and looked back one final time. The creature was standing in the monitoring room entrance now. It had moved silently without any of them hearing it, closing the distance to barely 10 meters. It stood between the old human skeletons at their stations like it belonged there, like it had always belonged there. It was not looking at the doorway. It was not looking at the exit. It was looking at Vial. Directly, completely. Memorizing him with those deep, lightless eyes, the way you memorize a face you know you will need to recognize again someday. Vial stepped through the door. He told himself it was the cold outside air that made him shiver. He knew it was not. Nobody spoke on the walk back to the ship. 6 people had gone into that prison. 6 people came out, but Vial could not shake the feeling that something had changed in the counting, that the version of his crew that walked back across the gray dust was not quite the same as the version that had walked in. Like something small and essential had been left behind in those corridors, scraped away quietly by a pair of lightless black eyes and taken as payment for the visit. Dara sat in the back of the ship and stared at the wall. Porus sat at his workstation and did not open a single file. For the first time since Vial had known him, he showed no interest in his scanner. It sat on the desk beside him and he did not touch it, did not look at it, did not seem to remember it existed. The others moved carefully around each other, speaking only when necessary, in the low, cautious voices of people sharing a room with something fragile. Vial sat in the pilot's chair and looked at the moon through the front viewport. From up here it looked the same as before, dead, gray, silent. The entrance door was not visible from this angle. The prison was invisible. The creature was invisible, but the heartbeat signal was still there on his screen, still steady, still slow. If anything, it seemed slightly stronger than before. He found Sane alone in the small research bay at the rear of the ship, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her back against the wall and her datapad flat in her lap. She was not reading. She was just sitting, eyes forward in the particular stillness of someone who has been thinking very hard for a very long time and has finally run out of road. Vial sat down on the floor across from her. He did not say anything for a moment. Then, "Tell me what you know." Sane looked at her datapad. She turned it over in her hands once, twice, like she was deciding something. Then she held it out to him. He took it. The screen showed a translated human document, old formatting, plain text, no images. A long file. He looked at the header. Archive Record 7, Final Station Log. Author, Dr. Anna Voss, Senior Containment Researcher. Date, year 2047 of the human stellar era. Location, Containment Facility, Restricted Moon, Sector 7. Null.Vale read slowly. Dr. Anna Voss had not written her final log as a formal report. She had written it the way a person writes when they know they are running out of time and they want to be honest. Short sentences. Plain words. No careful scientific language designed to make terrible things sound manageable. She wrote that the creature had been discovered approximately 300 years before her log, drifting alone near a dead star system at the edge of human explored space. A scout team had found it, studied it briefly, and brought it back. Standard procedure for unknown organisms. That had been the mistake, not the finding, the bringing back. She wrote that in the first year, 7 researchers died. Not violently. They simply stopped, sat down one day, and did not get up again. The medical teams found nothing physically wrong with any of them. No disease, no injury, no explanation. They had simply looked into its eyes for too long, too many times, and something essential in them had quietly switched off. She wrote that the creature was not malicious. She was very careful about this point, underlined it twice in the original document. It did not hate. It did not hunt for pleasure. It simply studied. Every living thing it observed, it cataloged completely. Behavior, fear responses, decision patterns, weaknesses. It stored all of it somewhere inside itself with a perfect accuracy that no machine the humans had ever built could match. And then it used what it had learned. Not cruelly. Not even consciously, perhaps. Simply the way a river uses gravity. Because that is what it does. Because that is the only thing it has ever done. Because it does not know how to do anything else. She wrote that the humans had tried to kill it for 200 years. Every weapon. Every method. Every idea that 2 centuries of the most inventive species in the galaxy could produce. Nothing worked. Not because the creature was indestructible, but because it learned. Every weapon used against it once was never effective a second time. It observed the attack, cataloged it, adjusted, and moved on. It was not invincible. It was simply a faster learner than anything that had ever tried to stop it. So they stopped trying. She wrote that the decision had not been made quickly or easily. It had taken 40 years of argument and grief, and the slow, painful acceptance of something most humans found almost impossible to accept. That there are some problems you cannot solve by being smarter or stronger or more determined. Some problems you can only solve by walking away. They built the prison first, lured it in with a research team that Voss did not name and did not describe beyond writing. They were volunteers, and they knew, and we do not forget them, sealed every door, locked every system, and then evacuated every human from every world in the surrounding sectors, not temporarily but permanently, giving up homes and stations and years of work, because staying near it meant feeding it. Every human face it saw, it remembered. Every human weakness it found, it kept. The only way to stop it from eventually learning humanity completely and learning them so thoroughly that no defense would ever work again was to give it nothing left to learn, to disappear. She wrote the final line in plain, tired words that carried the weight of everything that had come before them. We are not leaving because we lost. We are leaving because we love what comes after us. Whoever you are, whatever you are, and if you are reading this, the prison has been opened and it has seen your face. We are sorry. We tried to warn you. Do not fight it. Do not study it. Do not try to be clever, just go. Go as far as you can. And pray it is far enough. Vale set the datapad down on the floor between them. The research bay was very quiet. The ship hummed softly around them. Through the small porthole above Sane's head, the gray moon was still visible, small now, distant, almost innocent looking from up here. She wrote this before they left, Vale said. Yes, they built an entire prison, gave up their worlds, disappeared from the galaxy. He paused. To protect species they had never even met. Sane nodded slowly. Species that would not exist for thousands of years. That they would never see. That would never know what they had done. She looked at the porthole, at the moon. They did not do it for thanks. They did not do it for history. They did it because it was the only right thing left to do. Vielle sat with that for a long time. Outside, the moon floated in silence, and deep inside it, something that had now seen 6 new faces, learned 6 new fears, catalogued 6 new sets of weaknesses, moved slowly toward the open door of its chamber, taking its time. It had learned patience 10,000 years ago. It had learned it from the humans. Fail made the decision alone. He did not call a crew meeting. He did not ask for opinions. He sat in the pilot's chair for exactly 11 minutes, looking at the moon through the viewport, turning the choice over in his mind the way you turn a stone over in your hand, examining every side, every edge, every uncomfortable sharp corner. Then he opened a channel to the Galactic Science Council. The head of the council, a senior official named Breath, answered within seconds. His face on the screen was bright and eager in a way that made Vielle feel very tired. "Commander Vielle, we have been waiting for your report. The facilities, is it intact?" "The technology and the facility is intact," Vielle said. "The containment is not." A pause. "Explain," Vielle explained. He kept it brief. He used plain words. He described the creature, the open chamber, what it had done to Dara and Porus in those corridors. He sent Breath the translated copy of Dr. Voss's final log. He waited while Breath read it, watching the eagerness on the man's face change shape, first to confusion, then to something harder and more dangerous, concern that looked like it wanted to become anger. "We need to send a military response," Breath said. "Seal the moon again. Contain it properly, this time with modern—" "The humans tried that," Vielle said. "For 200 years, with technology far more advanced than anything we currently have." He kept his voice flat. "Patient. It learns, counselor. Every weapon you use against it becomes a weapon it understands and removes from your options. You get 1 attempt with anything, 1. After that it adjusts and your weapon is finished." Breath was quiet. "Then what do you suggest?" Vielle looked at the moon one more time. "I suggest," he said slowly, "that we do exactly what the humans did. We seal the sector. We update the warning markers. We tell every ship, every station, every species within range to stay away. And then, when we paused, we leave." The silence on the channel stretched long and uncomfortable. "And the creature?" Breath asked finally. "We hope," Vielle said. "That empty space gives it nothing to learn." He cut the channel before Breath could argue. He knew the council would argue anyway, would send transmissions for days, would demand reports and reconsiderations and military assessments. That was fine. He would deal with all of it later from a much greater distance. Right now he had one job. "Sane," he said. "Get everyone strapped in." The ship lifted off the moon's surface smoothly, climbing fast through the airless dark above the gray rock. Vielle pushed the engines harder than was technically necessary. Not from panic, he told himself, but from efficiency. Simple good sense. The faster they left the sector, the sooner they could begin the debrief. He watched the moon shrink in the rear viewport screen as they climbed, gray and dead and silent. The same as it had always looked from the outside. The same as it had looked for 10,000 years, while the creature inside paced its chamber, and waited and learned patience from the very walls of its prison. The door was open now. Vielle kept watching the screen for a long time, nothing. Then Zane, sitting quietly at the station beside him, said, "There." He looked at where she was pointing on her scanner screen. A heat signature, moving. Rising slowly upward through the facility's levels. Not rushing, not surging, just climbing steadily. The way something climbs when it has all the time it needs and knows exactly where it is going. It reached the surface. The rear viewport showed nothing. The moon was too far now and the creature too dark against the gray rock to see with simple optics. But the scanner showed it clearly. Standing on the surface, still, looking upward at them, Vielle engaged the lightspeed drive. The stars stretched. The moon vanished. The scanner cleared. They were gone. Nobody celebrated. The crew sat in their various corners of the ship and processed the hours behind them in private silence. Porus had not spoken since they boarded. He sat at his workstation with his hands flat on the desk in front of him and stared at the surface with the expression of a man who had opened a door expecting a cupboard and found an ocean. His certainty, that loud, cheerful, immovable certainty that Vael had always found mildly irritating, was simply gone. Not shaken, not damaged, gone, as if it had never been there. Dara slept. Vael checked on her twice. Her breathing was steady. Her vitals were normal. Whatever the creature had done to her in that corridor, whatever it had taken from her with that long, consuming stare, her body had not suffered for it. Only something else had. Something harder to measure and slower to heal. Oleg sat beside her and did not leave. Late in the ship's night cycle, when the corridors were dim and quiet, Vael sat alone in the research bay where he had read Dr. Voss's log. He held Sane's datapad in his hands but did not look at the screen. He was thinking about something Voss had written near the middle of the document, a single line he had passed over quickly the first time and had not been able to stop returning to since. She had written, "The hardest thing we ever did as a species was not building the prison. It was accepting that the prison was not the answer. It was accepting that we were." He thought about that for a long time. The humans had been the most powerful species the galaxy had ever produced. They had built things that still worked after 10,000 years of abandonment. They had solved problems that defeated every other civilization. They had looked at something that could not be killed and invented an entirely new category of solution. Not victory, not defeat, but something quieter and more difficult than either. Sacrifice without anyone to witness it. He thought about the 6 skeletons still sitting at their monitoring stations in the prison. Guards who had died at their posts watching a screen. He thought about Dr. Voss writing her final log in a facility she was about to seal forever, leaving a message for a species she would never meet, in a future she would never see. He thought about an entire civilization packing up everything they had ever built and walking away from it, not because they were beaten, but because staying would eventually mean everyone else lost too. He set the datapad down. Outside the porthole, deep space moved past in silence. Stars that had burned for billions of years, indifferent and ancient and vast beyond any number that meant anything to a living mind. Somewhere behind them, on a gray moon with no name, a door stood open for the first time in 10,000 years, and something patient and ancient and endlessly curious stood on the surface, looking up at the stars with those deep, lightless eyes, learning the shape of the sky, learning the direction the ship had gone. Learning, as it had always learned everything. 3 days later, Vael filed his official report to the Galactic Science Council. It was long and detailed and carefully written. It included Dr. Voss's complete log, full scanner records, medical reports for Dara and Porus, and a complete structural analysis of the facility. At the very end, in the section marked Recommendations, he wrote 4 sentences: seal the sector, extend the warning boundary to 12 light years in all directions, brief every spacefaring species immediately, and if any council member still wishes to send a military response after reading this report, please read Dr. Voss's log one more time. Then read it again. He submitted the report. Then he did the only other thing left to do. He sent a message to his family on the homeworld. Told them he was safe. Told them he was coming home. Told them he loved them, which was something he had always meant to say more often and had always found reasons to delay. He did not tell them what he had seen. He did not tell them that somewhere in the dark between the stars, something ancient and patient and impossibly intelligent now knew his face, his fear, the way his hands had shaken when he pulled Porus away from that corridor. He did not tell them that for the rest of his life, in the back of every quiet moment, he would wonder if it was enough distance. He closed the message and looked at the stars. He thought about the humans one last time, about everything they had given up, about the galaxy full of species living safe and free and completely unaware of the price that had been paid for that safety 10,000 years ago by people whose names no one remembered. He thought, we did not deserve them. Then softer, almost without meaning to, I hope wherever they went, they found somewhere the creature could never follow. The ship moved on through the dark. Behind it, in a sector of space that would be marked on every galactic map by the end of the week, a gray, nameless moon grew slowly smaller, and on its surface, completely still, a figure stood looking upward, watching the ship until it was gone, then looking at the rest of the stars, one by one, learning them all.